Take it away. Okay, I'm going to stand up and move to one side because I would like everybody in this room to appreciate that I have made a PowerPoint presentation. So I would like a round of applause for that. Julie helped me because there were a few moments where I was just yelling, just like, "Oh, Mom, get out of my way!" So I'm gonna ask John to. You aren't recording anything yet, but I'll just tell you one. So this talk came out of me bouncing into John's office last spring and saying, "I need to tell you what I did to my class." And he said, "Okay, can you talk about it in the fall?" And I said, "Sure." And I do want to apologize for my voice, but I think you can hear me. And so I want to talk about how I came to grips with a total failure on my part, evidently, in Western Civ, and what I did to change this. What I'm going to talk to you about today is how I changed all my writing assignments because the ones I was using just were a terrible bust, and I will show you what happened. So this really is a presentation of what I did in this one class. I'm trying to link it to some other classes that I teach a lot of empathy writing in. I've got a couple of kind of big question things I want to throw out there, and then I just want us to talk because you may have similar experiences, or you may say, "What the hell are you talking about? This is not going to work for me," which is fine. But I just wanted to get this out here. Okay, slide. Okay, so generally speaking, here's what history, the Western Civ requirement is. You can take a 100, a 101, or a 102. Your gen ed is one of these, okay? So 100 is Ancient World. That's a pretty new addition. When Catherine Milne joined our faculty, she introduced that. 101 goes as a model for many, many, many years. So, really very straightforward. I mix up the questions occasionally, different essay questions, but it's pretty much cut and dry. And so that's how I started Western Civ last spring. And we got to the first midterm, and I graded them, and then I looked at the grades again and thought, oh my God, what the heck happened? Because 60% of my students failed the first exam. That has never happened to me before. I usually have a couple of Fs, and those are students who don't come to class, students who don't study, whatever. But this time, more than half the class failed, and I had not changed my teaching style at all. And this was a class of chirpy, cheerful, ask lots of questions, really good discussions kind of classes, and I thought, what the heck just happened here? Now, I will say that the midterm came at the time when we entered the basketball playoffs, and that was certainly part of it. But I did not think basketball accounted for a 60% failure rate. And I thought, holy cow, I am failing as a teacher, what am I going to do? So next slide, this is my reaction. And then I decided I needed to move on from that. So, because nobody was bringing me tea, I was just giving them a stink eye. I went in, I gave them my big mom speech. I'm very disappointed in you. There's some quivering lips. But I didn't, I'm thinking, what the heck am I going to do? I can't just hope for the best. What am I going to do? So I decided this wasn't working. I was going to do something completely different. So if you ask me as a historian what the two major characteristics of the study of history are, and what are so important to students who are studying history, I would say context and empathy, and I say that all the time. History is about context, and it is about empathy for others, whether they are in the past, in different cultures, etc. So I am often talking about flexing our empathy muscles in class. Imagine this in class, doing things like that. And I wanted to see if by remodeling my written work, I could get more at the context I was supplying. And they were kind of getting it. They understood what Flora Tristan was talking about. They got kind of the basic nuts and bolts. But what I wasn't seeing was empathy. And I thought, well, maybe that's the problem. Maybe they're just not connecting this material in any way that makes sense to them. And how can I change that? Excuse me. So I thought about what I do in my other classes. And I do a lot of empathy writing in my upper division classes. I do a lot of kind of modified role playing. I do a lot of, here's a situation, I'm going to break you up into groups, respond to this particular situation. And one of the things I did the last time I taught modern Britain was to assign them roles. I actually wrote up a bunch of different roles that were specific to a time. They had to draw one out of a hat, develop a character, and then write responses to text from that perspective. And there was a lot more to the assignment than that, but we wanted to talk about why it is that a housekeeper in 1810 would respond to John Wesley's work in a different way than a member of the nobility or a member of the working classes. So we did a lot of context, but we also did this role playing. And I've got some of the examples of the avatars that I use. Now remember, this is an upper division class. They're almost all majors, and we have a common body of knowledge that they're coming into the class with and that we're learning. And so as you see, they were all over the place. You have an unfortunate gambling habit, you are not yet married. The student who picked that one really played up the drinking, I will tell you. He said, not only am I a gambler, I'm also drinking. But I encourage them to come up with a basic backstory for each of their avatars. And then again, for about 4 weeks, they would have the same avatar. We would cover these documents, and they would have to write a paper every week from that perspective, which they had developed in a series of classroom exercises. And respond to the texts that we were studying from that perspective. And as you can imagine, you're going to get much different responses to a single set of texts if you have a different context, if your background is different. And then on Fridays when we did this, everybody would respond in their character, and then they would talk to each other in their character. And so, we had a lot of kind of soap opera things going on. Is the guy going to stop drinking? What is he going to do, with his gambling? What about this poor factory girl who is about to be seduced by her 30-year-old supervisor? Those kind of things. And they really got into it. Again, upper division, this is a course for majors. You can assume things about a major course that you can't necessarily assume about a Western Civ course. But I really was so pleased with the success of these kinds of writing projects, and a bunch of different ones as well, not just the avatar writing, that I wondered if I could transfer that into Western Civ. So I wanted to, again, come up with empathy writing that got them to put themselves into a position of something that was different from what they were used to. Use those primary source materials and begin to, again, develop those empathy muscles and understand why history is actually important. It's not just people making stuff up. Why is this significant? Why is it still significant to us? Is it, whoopsie, indeed still significant to us? So I thought, okay, what the heck? So I walked into class and I said, no more exams. And they're like, score? We screwed up, and what's our reward? We don't have to take any more exams. But I did tell them that we were going to, take a much more hands-on approach to the material that we were using. So I want to show you the 3 projects that I introduced to replace all of the kind of traditional exam and paper writing that I had already had in the class. So next slide. Okay, so this is just, I love these kinds of slides. What my friends think I do, what I actually do. I love the what I think I do, because they are sure as heck not working that hard. So next slide. This is, no, sorry, we kind of covered that. There we go. Okay. So the first thing I did was a nation building exercise. Excuse me, where I told them that they had just split up from Austria. I put them into small groups. They had to come up with the things that you see here and write a reflective essay describing their process. And because I don't really care about being weird, they had to do a YouTube video advertising their country. So you may have seen my students in weird dress around campus, floating around, pretending to be whatever. That's what they were doing this for. They were videoing their country. And I chose these things because I wanted them to think about how you represent a country, how you represent ideals, and what those ideals are. What are the things that are so important to a nation, and why are they this important? And they had to do a lot of negotiating. And their reflective essay really talked about their process as well as why they made the decisions that they did. And then they presented their YouTube, and he talked about what they'd gotten out of it. And again, they were quite successful. The reflective essays were excellent. They really enjoyed this, even though you put a group project on the table and then you back up and wait for the "I hate you so much, I can't believe we're doing a group project." And I got a lot of that, but I asked them to kind of go along with me, and they did a really good job. So we had out of I think I had 5 groups, 4 of them decided that they were going to be liberal constitutional monarchies, which was not a surprise to me given the context. One of them was an autocracy, and they took it very seriously indeed. But they could justify all the decisions they made, which is what I wanted them to do. Not to say, oh well, I want to be, in power, like my 14-year-old who's all like, I'm going to be the most powerful one in the world. But instead, why would this work? Why would this work in the context of having broken off from Austria in 1848, 1850? What are the things I'm trying to protect? What are the things I'm trying to do? So that worked quite well, and they enjoyed it. They actually really got into the video that they presented, and some of them were quite remarkable, and a couple of them were a little silly, but that's okay, because that's, non-silly was not necessarily a recommendation here. So I was quite pleased with that. So I came up with 2 more, again, kind of avatar-y exercises that I used to sub out for the final midterm and the final exam. And so this next slide, there's a lot of text here, and I'm sorry here. Okay, is the intrepid reporter in 1913. So we're doing the second half of Western Civ, and one of the obvious breaks is what is happening that leads up to World War I, because there's about a zillion things that contribute to the outbreak of World War I. And so I turned them all into journalists for the New York Times. Very specifically, they are not European, they are Americans coming to Europe, and they are writing about what they see. And they had to use a certain number of documents. They had to use a total of 9 documents. There were 3 groups. And then they had to write a paper from the perspective of essentially a blogger. That's really what they were doing. And I said, think about being a blogger, what that would be like. They had to use a tone that was a columnist tone, a first-person tone. Am I standing in the wrong place?
No, I don't know what's going on, sorry.
That's okay. And when I say here, you can write, we interviewed Friedrich Nietzsche's sister to ask her about her brother's health. We had a document on Nietzsche with some of Nietzsche's writings. We had a lot of stuff on empire and things like ownership, indeed, of the Suez Canal, things like that. And I had some suggested perspectives there. And then I said, go to town. I did have some kind of a guided list of how to write this. How do you document and make sure you're citing properly, even though we are pretending to be newspaper reporters. I wanted to make sure that they were telling me where they got their stuff. Again, I had probably 20 sources, and then you pick 9. I had grouped them into empire, mass politics, and irrationalism, which were the major groups that we had talked about. And then I said, go for it. And I was amazed. I was amazed by how good the papers were. They loved doing this because they could use that first person, and they could, first of all, pretend they were somebody else, but also the things that really meant a lot to them, the things that they were really, really concerned about, they could treat in a way that was, meaningful to them. I had people who thought that the imperial scramble was a great thing in the 19th century, and they wrote from that perspective. I had other people who thought it sucked. They were bringing their own 20th, 21st century perspective to what happens after empire. They had to limit themselves to the documents at hand, but they could use that perspective to inform the way they read those documents. And they were, again, being very reflective about this, okay? The one thing I said was, this is not a report. You are not neutral. You are writing for an audience who loves you. So you've got a group of people who are following your every word. And they did a really good job with that. I was incredibly impressed. And then the final paper, and again, you'll know, June 1938, and I'm saying final exam, and yes, 102 is supposed to get up to the present, but I define present very loosely. And I figure if I get up, we got up to World War II, and I thought, well, what can I do to kind of, make this real to them? So I decided what we were going to do was something on appeasement, and I told them, as you see here, you are a brilliant speechwriter, and you have to write 2 speeches, not 1, but 2. You have to take the same set of sources. You have to write 1 speech based on these sources that is pro-appeasement. You have to write another speech based on the same sources that is anti-appeasement, because I want them to reflect on how it is that these documents can tell us different things. History is not just fill in the blank. It is, there's a lot of, again, context and other things that go into this. So 2 speeches, again, based upon the same group of sources, and I gave them some more information about how to do that. John, if you want to hit the next slide there. Okay, so wanted to make sure that there was context, wanted to make sure that they knew they could not make fact errors, they couldn't make shit up. Sorry. But they had to place this in the context of what actually happened, and we had used other sources as well, but I wanted to make sure that they knew that they could go and double check. So they couldn't turn events to their own advantage. They had to actually understand what happened and then talk about that again from their own set of interests. And I, again, had given them a lot of examples of what we had talked about in class. One of the things that I want to remind you of is that all of this stuff is coming from primary source material that we had talked about in class and that they had already written about. So this wasn't, go read a bunch of stuff that we've never discussed. They had read about this, they had written about this, they were building on work that they had already done for me in class. And I think that was very helpful because they could go back and say, oh yeah, I remember that question and here's what I wrote and now I understand why it's important, not just what she said, but why what she said is important in this context. So I've got a couple of I've just pulled from a couple of speeches. Tom, you want to go to the next one here? And these are my freshmen and sophomores, and I thought they did a really, really good job. Some of them are incredibly passionate writers, as you can see. The Sudeten will be merely a diversion, a side dish preparing the palate for the entree. I would never have gotten that in a normal, sort of traditional essay form. We had people who just were so passionate about this. And the next one, if you want to flip to the next slide, which is pro-appeasement. I will not bring upon my children and their children the hard days of 19 or the red days that preceded it. I mean, we've got language here, and they're using context, they're using these different documents, and they are, again, trying to get into, at least as much as they can in a Western Civ class, somebody else's head and somebody else's perspective. So I was very pleased with these because in general, these papers were fantastic. 60% failed the first midterm. Nobody failed any of these papers. Nobody failed any of these assignments. There were people who were uncomfortable with this. I had one student who was a senior, and I think she was finishing up her undergraduate education, and I think she looked at this and thought, this woman is crazy, and I am really uncomfortable. I'm really uncomfortable doing this. And her papers were very neutral in the sense, I'm asking them to get into character. She just didn't want to do that, and she tried a little bit, but she was really the least successful of all my students, even though in terms of content, she nailed it. She knew exactly what she was talking about, but she had a terrible time doing what I asked her to do. And as I was looking at this, I thought, I think it's interesting that she's a senior and she is not willing to do this. Whereas my freshmen and sophomores were like, you betcha, I'm in, let's try this. I'm willing to embarrass myself because everybody else is going to embarrass themselves too. But my senior, she was my only senior, was like, don't even look at me. So that, I'm still thinking about how to deal with that kind of that kind of thing. And I was also interested to see if I felt at the end of this, if I had given up content for some of this other stuff. And I really don't think I did. I have not changed my lecture content. I have not changed my quizzes. I have not changed kind of the way my course is organized. What I've done is to have been much more intentional about getting them to talk about, what does this really mean? Let's think about this as we're doing it. Let's live it at least a little bit as we are going through class, and start thinking about, okay, this says this. What does that really mean? What's that mean for a real person? What does that mean? What would that mean for you if you were living back then, or your mother, or your brother-in-law, or whatever? And one of the things that I know we have talked about, and we'll continue to talk about again as we are talking about Gen Ed, is when we think about the kind of the process and the way students learn and what we do pedagogically in the classroom, and are we giving up content for other very important outcomes? And I think we can sometimes think that we are doing that. I know that we often have conversations about humanities where people say, wow, we were going to teach 4 texts and I had to give up one because I didn't have time because the writing was so important to the class and I needed to spend more time with the writing. So the content kind of pedagogy tension is real, but in this case, I feel like it really didn't affect the way I covered the content. We did have much more kind of immediate conversations because they knew they were going to have to deal with this in a kind of a weird way. But on the whole, they loved it. They loved it. I got really creative essays, as you can see. I got a lot of enthusiasm. Our class discussions became much livelier because they were being encouraged to be as creative as possible. And I'm trying it again this semester with the 101 chunk, with the witch trials and the changes in religion and everything else. So I haven't finished reading all those assignments yet, but I'm definitely going to try it again. So to me, it showed me that with a class that covered many interests, non-majors, people who were terrified of history, people who were really comfortable with the idea of reading about the past and investigating the past. All of them kind of did it for me, and they were enthusiastic, and they were fearless, except again for this one senior who really was just like, get me out of here. So I was very pleased. I will tell you that I was not thinking ahead about assessment, and I apologize. And I was not scheduled to be assessed, and the students didn't do the college-wide assessment. So I leave you with this piece of assessment, which I love. This was a really weird paper for me to write, but I really enjoyed it. So I will formalize that piece of it. So again, what I really want to do is just kind of think about this and how, comments, or could you use it, or what do you do I'm always looking for new ways to address content in my classroom, and Western Civ for me was really the toughest nut to crack because it is so content heavy, it covers so much material, and I think if my students had not failed, I would not have done this, and I have to say I'm really glad I did, so I feel like I owe them a big thank you, even though, oh my God, 60% Fs, I had to go home and pour a drink. I was so upset. So I'm going to sit here, and then I thought maybe we could just talk to each other, if that's okay. Yes?
So the Intrepid Reporter one, did they write that paper as a group?
No. Okay. No. The big group project was the nation building exercise. Okay. And the paper that they wrote was an individual paper. So each person had to write an individual paper, but all the things like the preamble to the Constitution, the motto, the flag, all that was shared. Okay? And then there was a reflective essay that each person had to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the others, those were individual projects. So.
I love the variety of it a great deal, because I'm often interested in the amount of people who are writing up for different audiences. And so I love that idea that you put them in the writing context and writing for different audiences. did you spend time in class talking about what a speech is like versus what a newspaper
Yes.
article is like?
And
Or did they pick it up from, because you got primary sources that I'm sure reflected some of this, I didn't know if it was direct or indirect instruction.
it was both. It was both. We had a lot of examples, and then when I introduced the project, I said, okay, so now tell me, how are you going to do? What would we look for in a speech that we would not look for in,
Right.
et cetera? So.
I was gonna ask, do you still teach your class like this, or did you revert back to the?
No, I did not revert back. Last spring was the first time I completely threw out all the exams. This semester for the 101, I'm throwing out all the exams. I just haven't developed all the prompts yet, so.
Ann will tell you this, but I had one of my juniors, I think, pull out the note sheet that she gives out in her class.
The
She
lecture
said, and in class the other day and said, we were talking about how you handle lecture in my 344 class, the teacher aid class, and they said, these are fabulous that she does. It's enough information, but it's not enough. Pulled it out, and every one of them in line, so I'm bragging on her.
Well, as I tell my
But it
students,
was a very good one.
I don't memorize dates. I have to write them down, and I figure they need the dates and they need to know how to spell everything. Plus, with the roadmap, I can assume that they are going to actually get a picture out of what they're doing. So.
And you did talk about like assessment as well. When you're grading essays, did you have a rubric? Like, what did you
I did, and I probably should have pulled that, and
Okay.
I just didn't. But I had developed a rubric so that they knew, for example, in both cases, fact errors were something I expected them not to do, and they had sources to go to. I was very specific that, you may be imagining the past, but you're imagining a past that's already happened, and you need to know what you're talking about. So there were, a point spread for that. The nation building had a very involved rubric, in part because I was combining a group project with a variety of written instruments.
So for all these assignments, do they have to do independent research outside of the documents that you provided?
No, and I think that was the key. Because we had a textbook in class, I lectured, and my lectures are pretty thorough. And then we had all those primary documents which we had touched on in class. Even if we didn't specifically address every single one, they had written on them, we had talked about generally what the themes were, et cetera. So I didn't want outside research, and there are some Western Civ instructors who assign a research paper, and I thought, I'm not gonna do that, I'm gonna try it this way and see what happens. So, because again, you can't hit all those outcomes in the same class. I mean, you just can't. All the things we want them to know, you got to pick and choose. And I decided I was not going to do an outside research paper on a topic of their choice. I wanted them to use the documents in class and write about those.
I mentioned the benefit then is that it's reasonable to assume that they put much more effort into being creative because they're not putting all that time
Yes.
into research.
And I wanted,
fair trade-off
Yeah.
to like how they look. You don't have to go do research, so I expect you to spend.
that's exactly what I said. So do not go outside anything we've looked at in class, but I want you to understand, A, the context, in other words, don't make things up, and B, the empathy. What is it that, think about what we're trying to get at here. So.
You talked about context and empathy being the two tenets from which you approach the teaching of history. Are you explicit with your students about saying context and history?
Yes.
Context and empathy?
Yes, I am.
And
I used to not be.
Yeah.
And then when I started moving to this kind of writing, I thought, they need to know why we're doing these weird things. And I do weird assignments in almost all my classes. And so I just start out by saying, empathy muscles, you have them. This is what we are doing to flex them. Why is empathy so important in history? And, we talk about it. So,
what's the response to the empathy? Do they get it?
There's a lot of looking down at their laps and maybe somebody else will answer this. And so I then say, okay, well, what is empathy? And we kind of talk about what that is, and then why is it important in history, and why is understanding what this would look like from a perspective richer than simply reading primary documents, and I am not dissing. In fact, I assign very traditional papers in all of my classes. Well, not in these classes anymore, but in my other divisions, I mix it up like crazy. So I do a lot of traditional stuff as well. But I think this just enriches what I'm getting from my students. And I think it enriches their experience of the class. The modern written class, there was actually a very traditional research paper at the end, as well as the empathy writing and a couple of other kinds of writing. So I don't know that I would ever, in an upper division, switch over completely to this, because I want a lot of other stuff as well. But again, for a Western Civ where we are talking non-majors, terrified students who don't want to be there and think that they can talk about Nazis all the time, you know, this seemed to work for that set of students quite well. I was really happy with it. It was a lot of grading. It's a lot easier to grade a regular midterm than it is to do this, but they were so much fun to read that it kept me going. So.
I was just gonna say, knowing that you also teach Humanities 101, have you transferred some of this into that course as well? Do you find that?
I do wacky stuff in my, yeah. One of the things that we're about to do, so for those of us who are 19th century people, the murder has happened in Mary Barton. And one of the things that I will have them do is to write a crime story about who did the crime, and then how are they representing the criminal? Are they representing him as a trade union person, and why? Are they representing him as a crime of passion kind of person, and why? So we're going to be getting at domestic and political novels and the purposes of that. So yeah, I don't think they're ready for that yet, but they're about to get it. So.
I was struck by something you said. I'm sorry, I'm
You're getting
the same way.
Yeah.
This is an interesting argument to me that there's a content delivery that's supposed to happen in all of these 3 classes, and that's somehow supposed to meet a larger goal that they don't happen, right? Like not everybody's getting the same content, not everybody's getting even with
Right,
the same
we're not. I agree.
Is something that is not taught in a lot of ways in other places, because they're having to do things that they don't normally have to do.
Right.
Right? And they're not applying their modern perspective. They're having to take history for its own context. So I just wonder, do you talk about that? I mean, you talk as a content or as a goal of the course. I mean, outside of just calling it empathy, like you're talking about sort of a way of writing that's inviting them to be flexible and understand audience. I mean,
I probably do that implicitly. I don't do it explicitly enough, and that's probably something I will work on as I continue to do this, because I think the more they understand the reasons for what we're doing, the more eager and willing they are to do the goofy stuff that I'm asking them to do. So, yeah, I'm still pretty new to kind of the meta discussion in my own head of why I'm doing this stuff. I have a fairly good idea of what I think is going to happen, but I may not be able to articulate it very well, and I'm working on that part of it. So I will say that the final exam, which said final exam question, was laying in the coffee room, and one of my colleagues picked it up and said, well, where's the rest of your test? So I, in many styles go into every department. I think some of my colleagues think I'm a little crazy. Yeah.
I can't not think outside of gen ed right now. So
I know.
So it strikes me that what you are helping your students with with this part of your course, that strikes me as like gen ed. Like that's something we should build up, right?
I think it is too, because we're.
Yeah, but the content part, it means we should take that with John's observation. Was the content part? It seems like it doesn't really matter if it's like.
May I kiss you on the lips? Because seriously, again, I think this is a conversation that's going to be really difficult for a lot of us to have. But I was saying this to Christine just the other night. If we could come up with a list of outcomes that we could all agree on, which included things like what I'm trying to do here. You could turn Western Civ into an intro seminar on witchcraft, an intro seminar on anything, right. And still, I think, get at, because, I love Western Civ because it's the big picture, and I love all the stories, and I can bring in the weird stuff, but a lot of our students hate it. They just hate it, and they zone out, and it's a constant struggle to try to get them to be kind of minimally
But this
interested.
strikes me as a much higher order outcome, or a higher order competency or skill that you're helping your students to obtain, rather than like knowing the facts. Of
I know, and
it
as I tell
helps
you,
you
you
on
can
Jeopardy,
look
maybe.
stuff up if you
Yeah,
are
right.
a little bit unclear.
Use Google.
I do it all the, yeah, that's just it. Take your phone out and somebody Google X. Tell me what happened in this particular rebellion. And, they can do that. And yeah, that's great. They don't really need me for that. What I want them to do is kind of take that and get bigger than that. So.
I also think it's a worthwhile goal to have students have fun and enjoy learning.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right, I mean, like, it's not a, quantifiable thing, but like to have students like leave class and be like, man, that was so much fun today.
Yeah.
Like, that's also a worthwhile thing, because not just because, they might be happier about your class and like you better, but more importantly, because that is fulfilling then a development of a lifetime interest in learning.
Yeah.
Right? Learning is no longer seen as, oh, I have to check this box and get this thing over with, I can go make money somewhere. Right? And no, this is something that can be fun, something to be interesting, to be engaging. And so I think that's a worthwhile thing to have come out of some of these assignments for some of your students too. I'm assuming based on what you said that some of them just also really enjoyed it.
They really did. At least they said they did, and they didn't have to say that. They could just say, "Fine, it's done."
Yeah.
But I got a lot of, "This was so cool, Dr. Rodrick. I loved this."
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I think the freshmen and the sophomores are wildly open to experimentation, and by the time they are discipline specific, maybe less so. But certainly, in this case, the babies were way better at saying, "Sure, I'll try anything." So.
Well, John Dewey would be proud of you, because in providing that opportunity, you made that learning relevant and meaningful for you.
I was hoping that I could do that. Now, doing that in the first chunk of like 1642, that may be a little bit more of a challenge, although, in part because I think, to be perfectly honest, and I think that one of the things I'm gonna have problems with this semester is the documents are so much harder for them to read. And it's gonna be, I'm gonna have to walk them through what I want much, much more carefully than in the second half. So the more modern stuff is just more accessible by its very nature.
Do they need to write in the style of those documents?
I am not going to ask them. Here, you're at the Department of 1641, go. I can't do that to them, but I think creative anachronism is fine in a lot of ways. Again, as long as you're not making some huge confusions of your facts and changing history as you write it, if you're interpreting it, I'm fine with that. So, and I think that's where things are going to land this semester as I start looking at how I'm going to deal with that.
It's kind of a spin-off on that. In another lifetime, I was a teacher. I taught history for 23 years ago. And I had a marginal student once who was asked to do a local history project. And she all day long would say, "I'm doing your work, I'm doing your work." As y'all all know, students will look at you and say, "Your work, your work." Well, when she came to her local history project, I asked her, I knew that she had a grandfather who was going to be 90, and I knew that his birthday was coming up. So I asked her to do a family history to be presented to her grandfather.
Oh.
That just lit a fire under that
Yeah.
girl. She wasn't doing my work anymore. She was working for her grandfather. So I think an assessment, the intended audience of the assessment sometimes makes them take it another direction.
Yeah, I think it does too.
You're looking at people that steal money from other people, thinking it really should be either an obituary or a eulogy, instead of what it is now. And I'm thinking, I'm loving this idea though of introducing, especially the flexibility, because it's something I wrestle with. Business writing is where I talk an awful lot about audience, but by then I'm in certain contexts for them that are pretty narrow and defined. But I'm thinking that there is a level of learning about. See, first of all, you're teaching the history is about people, and I did have to come to college to learn that. I did not know that until I got to college. But also that then through our rhetorical constructions and our ways of approaching one another, that there are different ways to do it, and that you shape not only content, but your relationship with the other person by expressing it in certain ways. I think there's a complexity to this experience that's very, very good on the gen ed level. I mean, I like it across the board, but I think once you've got those pieces in place, if college frees you up to do some of that, or if you did some of it in high school and continues that work, sometimes I worry that we shut them down when they get here, that we've got certain kinds of writing we do, and, you know. So I'm just loving the flexibility of that, and I love that, it's got me thinking in different ways.
Yeah, it's amazing to, first of all, to take class in progress.
Yeah.
Go,
I was a desperate woman. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought, I can't do this. I will kill myself. If this is the rest of the semester, I will kill myself.
Yeah, but I mean, your desperation didn't turn to, I'm gonna hammer this information into them. Your desperation turned to, how can I help these people enter into this conversation that I want them to enter into with a set of text, which is like vastly different than what could have happened. And so, but one thing I think there's got to be a way to figure out how a student who has your Western Civ class, not that I'm looking at this as something we should do, but someone who has your Western Civ class, who does these different kinds of assignments, who handles a variety of different kinds of genres, different primary sources, different, all kinds of materials, they have to be better researchers in the end.
I think
And they have to be
are.
better, I mean, they're
Yeah.
better writers in the end because they're understanding.
Better readers.
Yeah,
I
they're
think that's-
approaching
yeah.
text in a vastly different way than just read this, go research these things, and then produce this.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's
Really
fascinating.
provide them that after look at the age. You know, like a keyhole,
Mhm.
they can look through that assignment and see a whole age of it.
Yeah, thanks. If I had not already started doing this in all my other division classes, I don't think I would have been brave enough to do this. I think the fact that I had done so much other empathy writing in my other classes, I thought I could do anything.
Where's so empathy writing is your thing or is it a thing?
It's my thing, but it's something that historians do talk about.
They talk about it as
Yeah.
empathy.
Mhm. Yeah. And it probably goes by different names in different disciplines, so.
Because it's just,
But-
to me, it's like
Right,
reconstruction.
right.
Empathy is something different.
Okay, well, for historians, this is empathy writing, so.
But it's what we see when we watch a historical reconstruction.
Right.
So they're used to seeing that happen.
But not managing it themselves, which I think is.
That's the nice next step.
Yeah.
For other terms.
And it also shows, I mean, you all probably already said this, but it shows them how narratives are constructed, that, you know, there's somebody behind the curtain, you can create different narratives.
Which is one reason I said 2 speeches using the same sources, because they really, I think they loved that one the most of all of them, partly because they were getting used to the weirdness that I was asking them to do, but partly because I had several who said, oh my gosh, I can use this text to say this and this.
Mhm.
Oh, that's weird. I'm finding that very troubling, but I'm going to do it anyway. So, and that was, you know, I was hoping that they would get some complexity out of that. So,
That sucks. I mean, that's good too.
yeah.
Oh, heck yeah.
So, I know somebody came, wait, it could say this, but then it could mean this. Is this cheating? No, it's not cheating. So, yeah.
So Anne, you're saying at your upper level that you have them do a paper and some empathy kinds of writing stuff?
They do so much writing for me in all of those classes, yeah.
I did a project that it was something like this where we had to do role plays and create different kinds of written documents for different audiences. But I incorporated the scholarly stuff into that too. So they had to, different groups had to, so group A would create a fictional something using empathy. The group B would have to do a scholarly analysis of group A's creation. So it was like it was incorporated the scholarly with the project. So it ended up being really successful.
What year was it? Was it the first
I
year?
know these were senior.
Yeah.
Junior, senior.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was not first year.
That is really cool.
It'd be interesting to see too how this would work with texts with which they are more familiar. So I'm thinking, you know, a lot of this stuff I'm assuming they've never seen it before, but I'm thinking, what if we had try to make both sides of the argument or 3 sides of the argument, something like the Bible.
Those are murky waters.
Yeah, those are murky
You know?
waters. That's another topic.
No, we could appoint a humanities day where two students suggested potential thesis for something, and they were in opposition. And I looked and I said, oh, here we are in week 5, and we have opposing theses. We are doing great as a group, and we were doing great as a group. And you saw them get very nervous about which one, because they were invested and all. And you can see where this kind of thinking, if you can help them get to it with either the writing the opposing things or just pick one, but you've got to set it up. And then when they read the others, they don't think I do that in humanities. I don't know if they could ever get there, but I love that next level. Your junior year, what are you going to do that's going to complicate it a bit, and that complicates it.
Thanks for coming, Sal. So yeah, I would love to hear the wacky things that you guys do, because I'm always looking for new ideas. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do. And steal whatever you want, steal it.
One thing I did similar to this in my survey, literature survey, literature management present, they read different poets, representations of poetry, and then they had to use a contemporary form, Twitter, and they would tweet like that poet's perspective on poetry in a tweet.
I love
And they
that.
tweeted them out and I posted it on Moodle, and they were so good. It was the best I've seen, and it was really fun. So they could use like slang and stuff in this from our moment to kind of express what they needed to.
That's interesting. I'm teaching the 344 course for us, which is like a trade class. It's kind of dragging me through this. And so we spend a lot of time looking at how you teach things. And so I'm always trying to model something that's unusual, but also getting them to bring in things. And so I came in with To Kill a Mockingbird the other day, and I said, okay, I got 3 things for you. Either choose Scout or Jim or both. And what did they tweet at the end of the trial? And my class was really uncomfortable because I've got juniors and seniors in there, and I'm interested in how we rigidify them. That's not a word, but you know what I mean? Or petrify them a little bit. And I said, okay, Atticus is going to text Miss Maudie at the end of the trial. What does he text? And they sat, and they were in groups, and they were working, and I'm thinking, talk to you later. This what I mean, yeah, it didn't matter. But they were almost paralyzed by the. And for me, I'm just modeling, here's an interesting thing that you could do in your classroom, but we're doing it because that's, I think, what you do. And they really were, and the more stand-up do-right you are, by a sophomore and a junior and a senior year, you kind of know what the rules are, and when I start messing with you on that, it has to be low stakes, it has to be, so this, that some were like, oh, this is really good. Mine were a couple, and it's my marginal students that go, oh, I do hashtags. The rest of the class goes, hashtags. Woo, and it was opening up, but for me it was an opening activity, so we can move on to a little more generic stuff. But I'm loving what this does, and I'm thinking, okay, what do we do in our other classes, even if it just adds more actors? I like that idea. Here's a moment. Let's do something a little different.
This is the thing that reminds me, so in my class on Revolution and Regime Change, we do a role play thing where there's major different groups in society that are often involved in a transition. And so they're assigned to be the military or the hardliners, softliners, or the civil rights activists out in the street. And I had one year, I had a student that was assigned to be the military. And you gotta be hardcore, like you're not in the military, like you support the authoritarian regime, like you're willing to go out and shoot people. Like it's the role play that they have to play, like give them kind of, we read stuff, we talked about it, and so they also have like some guidelines, kind of what to make up countries and stuff like that. And she hated it. She was like traumatized. She's like, you don't ever do that again, you're not gonna. I'm like, it's meant to be a traumatic experience. So sometimes, I've done it multiple times before, but it was really, like, I don't know, odd.
Would she have done better if she'd been in a different group? Yeah. So it just was. It was
really
just
hard
such a big leap. Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know, role-play, but
Taking very
just very resistant to having to play that way.
Yeah. Well, the one who resisted so much really was that she was a stand-up do-right. She has, just a really, I think, had been an excellent student and just was appalled at what I was trying to do in class.
Do you think if it occurs to her from day one, what was gonna happen in the class, but that might have just been better. Like, she might have dropped the class, or she just would have known what she was signing up for, and she would have been less resistant.
Reading her writing, I don't think that would have made any difference. I really don't. I think this was, that final gen ed, she'd saved it for the end. Why did I do that? I should have done this 2 years ago. She was a really good student in the sense that, she knew what I was teaching her, but so the content of her stuff was really good. The tone was terrible because she couldn't do it. She didn't want to do it. She wasn't willing to do it. She was really smart. So, but yeah, she was my only student. Econ. And
But no, about training, right? Like, you're trained in a particular way.
oh yeah, she
Discipline.
could not.
And like, she's been trained in econ in a way that is probably not supportive of that type of.
Oh, I think she looked at me like I was from another planet. I mean, she and I talked a lot, but we were very friendly. But yeah, I think her discipline was the way she thought about everything, and she couldn't do this, or again, didn't want to. So again, and we look at the Western Civ enrollments right now, and we see so many students who are not even going to be able to take Western Civ until they're junior or senior. And I think that's one of the problems that we're going to run into is that we're trying to get these students in the gen ed fresh in a lot of ways. So.
Is that the assumption usually we built with Western Civ that you're gonna have
Fresh and, then we get them as fresh people and as sophomores. And more we're getting them as sophomores and juniors, and now we're getting seniors.
But see, in religion, we get like sophomores, juniors, some seniors, no freshmen, and that's
Western Civ's supposed to be a freshman class.
yeah.
I mean, it was designed to be a freshman class, but it's not solely that anymore. We try to hold some seats for every entering class, but they used to be, when I got here, they were mostly first-year students, and that has changed over time.
Yeah, but I don't think we have the empathy deficit amongst our more.
No, I don't think you do either.
Yeah.
I think
you got like the one.
Well, and I think it really was that I'm just uncomfortable trying to do this because I'm really good at the other stuff I do, and frankly, I'm a senior and it's spring and I don't want to work this hard.
Right.
I think that was a lot of what was going on there.
Right.
So if I had her in the fall, I think maybe she might have loosened up, but her eyes were on the prize, And I don't blame her. I don't blame her one little bit, but I thought it was interesting that she was the only one who resisted, and everybody else was willing to play along. And I had a bunch of guys who, when I walked in, I thought, oh, these ones are going to be trouble. Do I even have to? They're in the back. They're talking to each other. They became my most enthusiastic participants. They loved this. Yeah. So, because the first exam, they were the leaders in the F. Right? And a part of it was I could just see the rest of the semester with that group of boys just killing me. So, So I was willing to go nuclear on them.
Do you think that they were more open to doing this because they had done so badly on the traditional? So for some of them, they could have just somewhat processed, why not try this? Because I'm doing horrible if we kept it the way it was before.
Well, to be honest, what I did was, when I introduced the nation building one, I said, you guys just failed, as a group, you failed that mention. I do not understand why. I was really like, what is wrong with you guys? Is it me? Is it, and it was basketball, and it was them. A lot of it was basketball. But when I introduced the nation building, I said, okay, guys, I'm throwing in all the exams. We're going to see how you do on this project. If you perform at your peak, and that doesn't mean everybody has to get an A, but I need to know that you're really working hard, then I will design the rest of your assignments along these lines. I left it kind of open, like, I'm going to do something different. I'm not sure what it is, I may resort to oral exams for all of you, and then where will you be? But I did say, if you perform really well on this one, then I think we can have a lot of fun with the next two, and I'll design around that. And they did really, really, really well. So, yeah, so, because I couldn't, in good conscience, keep the exams outstanding, in part because it was so dreary grading one bad essay after another.
I was thinking, as you were saying that, how much of the things that I do now that I think work the best came out of self-preservation?
I know it, I know,
I can't believe this.
as a pedagogic strategy, I think it's very valuable.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I can't do this anymore, therefore you will be doing something different. For me, yeah. So, thank you guys for coming. Next one, which is John.
What are you gonna talk about, John?
I'm going to talk about
I'm gonna get some.
critical pedagogy.
Boring.
Does it have Nazis, John?
That was rude. But I'll continue now. It's a case study of two different students. One's a first year student who's first asked to